USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Sunday, March 24th, 2024. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at Xcel Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. Jim, it's Selection Sunday. The selections, the brackets have been announced, and now we get to talk to the chair of the committee to explain how the process worked.
Joining us now, the chair of the men's NCAA Division I Ice Hockey Committee, the athletic director at the University of Vermont, good friend Jeff Schulman. Jeff, busy day, Selection Sunday. It's kind of your Super Bowl day to get this tournament kicked off and rolling. Before we get into a lot about why teams went where and how decisions were made, can you just, for the not as educated, take us through some of the guidelines that really shift and move decisions when you're making up this NCAA tournament bracket?
Sure. I guess the first thing to emphasize, obviously, if a lot of the people who are close to the college hockey community know, is that the actual selections of the teams for the tournament, are very objective, which is a little different than most, really all other sports in college hockey. So we go strictly by the pairwise rankings to determine the 16 teams in the tournament, along with obviously the automatic qualifications. So that's the starting point in terms of who's actually selected. When it comes, so there's not a lot of intrigue, right, about who the 16 teams are going to be. Once we get through the games on Saturday night, the conference championships, we know who those teams are going to be. But there's a lot that goes into the bracket, and I think that's what you're specifically asking about. I mean, there's several bracketing principles and parameters that we apply that really drive the final bracket that we ended up with this year and have in the past. And first of all, bracket integrity is in primary importance. So we're trying to do everything we can to have competitive equity and reward the teams that performed at the highest level throughout the season. Along with that, we're also balancing a couple other key factors. One being that as long as there's not more than 4 teams from a particular conference in the tournament, we avoid intra-conference matchups in the first round games. We also have committed to keeping schools that are serving as the host institutions at any of the regionals at their host site. So that was obviously a critical factor this year in keeping UMass at home in Springfield, because they're a host institution, and Omaha at home in Sioux Falls, because they're the host institution. And then we're also trying to balance creating a really exciting championship atmosphere at each of these regional sites. And so, again, while maintaining bracket integrity, while avoiding intra-conference matchups, keeping host schools at home, we're also trying to make sure each site has good attendance and an exciting atmosphere that's fitting of a national championship. So those are the factors that go into our decision making.
How, as the chair, do you personally approach this? Do you do things individually and bring it to the committee? Do you just meet as a committee? When did the committee meet throughout the week and this weekend? Can you just kind of give us a little bit behind the scenes on the process to even start?
Sure. It's pretty simple. I open up USCHO and look and see what you guys tell us that didn't know. So I'm working really closely. We've got a great committee that's representative of the various conferences in college hockey. We have a mix of coaches and administrators. We're talking throughout the year about how things are shaping up. But as you know, it ultimately comes down to where the numbers sit after the final game has been played. And then we're all sort of sketching out our own brackets, and we're knowing what the principles are. We're all looking at it. We're coming up with concepts. Then we get together on a call and we kind of hash it out. And again, factor in the different principles. listen to each other's opinions, and ultimately, through consensus, come up with the bracket that we think best fits the national championship.
What were the biggest conversations in the meeting this morning, whenever it took place today?
So there are a few things. I think, when you look at the bracket, obviously Denver stands out, having to move east and BU out west. And, those aren't things that we take lightly. We know that these are two of the best 4 teams in the country, and they deserve credit for that. And we have to apply the principles that we're bound by. And so when you do that, this is obviously what we thought was ultimately best for the tournament. The challenge with keeping Denver in the West was that it would have ultimately adversely affected other teams that were even more highly ranked than in Denver. And so that created a challenge for us. And because we needed to keep UMass in Springfield, we needed to avoid a first round NCHC versus NCHC matchup. And so when you factored all of that in, it would have likely meant that BU was not matched up with RIT, and likely would have been matched up with Western Michigan. And that committee felt strongly that BU, as the number 2 overall seed, deserved to play the number 15 team in the bracket, which is up to you.
I don't know how much you have followed as you're getting in. I assume you're probably watching this on a week-by-week basis, even though the only time the pairwise matters was last night when you knew the 16 teams and their seeding. But it looked like it could have been a mess at times. I think in one of my bracketology columns, I think I had the number 1 seed playing the number 14 seed, because that was the closest you could get without, destroying things with conference. Do you have to just kind of take a deep breath now and say, maybe we got a little bit lucky, but it does work out. This, I wrote last night that I thought it was one of the easier brackets to figure out. But was there some stress going through your mind and the committee's mind as we came down the stretch in the season?
Yeah, I try not to get too stressed about it, like you said, until the final pairwise. And obviously, I was monitoring it closely and knew what some of the possible scenarios looked like. And yeah, certainly there was a time at which it looked like there was a good chance that there could be 5 NCHC teams in the tournament. There were other times that Hockey East had 5 or 6 that were in the mix, and that those scenarios certainly would have created challenges for us. But we do have a principle that says if there's more than 4 teams from a particular conference, we have the flexibility to match teams up in inter-conference way in the first round. So. It's it just shows there's so much parity in college hockey. The difference between teams is so slight. I think in the end, UMass ended up getting the last at-large spot by like 4/100ths of a point in the RPIs. So lots of different permutations, and I think you're right. Again, the bracket sort of played itself out given our various parameters and the teams that ultimately qualified for the championship.
More with Jeff Schulman in a moment. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
And we're back with Jeff Schulman, University of Vermont Athletic Director. Jeff, looking at Minnesota, Omaha as 2-3 in a region, and also with Maine and Cornell, do you feel that you've gotten brackets that are going to give you the best attendance result after following all the rest of the parameters like bracket integrity?
Yeah, I think actually all four regions are well positioned for strong attendance. And, Sioux Falls, Omaha is, I think, maybe 2.5 hours from Sioux Falls. The Gophers fans obviously travel really well. One of those teams is going to be in the regional final. So I think that site is well positioned. Maryland Heights, the St. Louis bracket is some big brand teams, and as you know, a little bit of a smaller venue capacity there. So I think they'll be banged out both nights for that region. Providence with BC and Quinnipiac and Wisconsin. That's alums everywhere. So I think they'll do well. And Springfield, obviously, with UMass the host, and Maine and Cornell both travel well. Maine fans, showed up in big numbers at the Garden this weekend, and Cornell fans, they always travel well. And, and obviously UMass been so close to Springfield. So I think the regionals are really well set up from an attendance standpoint. And, that's been a real point of emphasis for the committee over the past several years, is wanting to create a real championship atmosphere at these regional sites that fits in a national championship.
Jeff, we're talking about this year's championship, but before I let you go, I have to ask kind of the pertinent question that a lot of people are talking about in the future. I know you've assigned a couple of more regions for the next couple of seasons, but it seems like there's such a strong discussion these days about possibly moving at least the opening round to a campus site. Is that even something that's feasible with what the committee has, and how serious of a discussion do you think that will be as meetings take place in Naples and then among the committee in Indianapolis?
Yeah, as you know, it's that conversation around potential campus sites, and there's a few different ways you can do that. It's been ongoing for many years, and it ebbs and flows. And I think, it seems to have been gaining some momentum over the past year or so. I know there's some people who really strongly believe in it, and we'll continue as a committee to have those conversations and talk to and listen to the college hockey community. We're all interested in seeing this be the best championship that it can possibly be. And there's a lot of ways to approach that, and a lot of different opinions on that. So I think it's an important conversation for the college hockey community to always be having. And ultimately, it's a decision for the committee to make on the NCAA looking at a major change in format. It's part of the broader conversation about the best direction for the championship to work.
Well, this year's championship, it will kick off this Thursday, and we're very excited. I know the college hockey world is very excited. I think you've got a great field with 4 great regionals. Jeff Schulman, we know that this is a long day. It's a busy day. So we appreciate a little bit of your time. We'll hope you enjoy the championship. We'll see you in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Thanks, guys. Look forward to it.
And that's University of Vermont Athletic Director Jeff Schulman. He's the chair of the Men's D1 Ice Hockey Committee. Jim, I think it was pretty transparent how the committee came up with this. And, obviously it matched your bracket, so you were thinking along the same lines. Maybe just the swapping of in the middle of Maine and Cornell and getting a Minnesota with Omaha. That really sort of fixed everything attendance-wise and made the bracket feel pretty good.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Obviously, when I came up with this on a Saturday evening late, and was trying to explain my rationale to a lot of people around the Hockey East tournament post gathering, and I understand where they went. And sometimes if you can do it, and it's one thing I've learned about the committee over the years, if they can do it, they will make the changes as simple as possible. You had to change Omaha. You had to get them away from North Dakota. So you swap them with Michigan. And then once you've done that, it was just swapping 2 pairings out to get 2 of the Eastern teams East and 2 of the Western teams West. That has protected all of the attendance concerns that will create great atmospheres. I really do agree with Jeff that if you have any concern, maybe it could have been Sioux Falls, but I think you're going to see some pretty good crowds there, especially as you kind of highlighted there at Omaha and Minnesota, both of those within a 4.5 hour drive, Omaha even closer and as the host in the region. So I think when all is said and done, you have set up a near perfect bracket for a year that looked like it was going to be a nightmare.
You got into the topic with Jeff about on-campus sites. It's just something that gets kicked around a little bit. On one hand, with the committee doing a good job with attendance, that becomes less of an issue. But you think of first-round games with these top 4 seeds with Agganis or Magnus or Munn or Conti Forum and how banged out those buildings would be.
Yeah, I was looking at this last night, and you mentioned it: Conti Forum, Agganis, Magnus Arena, Munn, Orono, the Alfond, Engelstad Arena, 3M Arena, and then who was number 8 was Wisconsin. I mean, the
Kohl Center
building. Yeah. If they Kohl Center, you fill that up. It's a very interesting future. I do feel, and Jeff didn't address it directly. They've awarded bids, and for teams to bid, they have to promise certain amounts of revenue to the NCAA years in advance. They don't have to come up with it years in advance, but they have to promise it. And that's tied to the amount of attendance that you'll have in that region. I would think that because there is that contract, there will also be kind of a reversal of the contract, and that the NCAA cannot suddenly take regional bids away from cities in the next 2 years. So anything that's awarded, I basically, what I'm saying is I don't think we can see campus sites obviously this year, but not for the next 2 years, maybe 3 years down the road. And we'll learn that pretty soon. December, I think, is when the committee is certainly going to award the next few Frozen Fours. That would probably be the right time for them to award the next few regionals. That would begin starting in the cycle of 2027. So we might know by December-ish if that's going to happen, or if we don't find out that there's been any regionals awarded, that gives some time to possibly at least discuss it more. I think I've always enjoyed the regionals. I've liked the thought of knowing where you're going to work. At least that's a very selfish thing. But for fans, how many fans of North Dakota have already bought tickets to Sioux Falls? And they're now trying to unload them and trying to find a way to get into a 2,600 seat building in Maryland Heights. How many fans of Boston University were so convinced that they would be out in Springfield that they've bought their tickets already? So it's difficult, but I get it. The atmosphere in all of those 8 buildings that I just listed out would be banged out, sold out buildings. And those are some big buildings.
And I think maybe the conferences are going to be the experimentation, the petri dish for it. Only one of the preset Final Four buildings really was full, and that was TD Garden, which was crazy. Sort of disappointing, I'd have to think, for the NCHC and ECAC. Meanwhile, Michigan State, Bemidji, and RIT hosted sold-out buildings with incredible atmospheres.
And listen, I give Hockey East some credit, but sometimes you have to get lucky too. You have unbelievable talent. You have 2 of the best teams in the country. You had 3 of the top 5 in the pairwise at the end of the season, and 4 of the top 14. And even when you had some teams below that, they were pretty close to the border. This was a good year for Hockey East, but the nearly 18,000 fans a night in TD Garden is not the norm. The norm is usually somewhere between maybe 11 and 15,000. So this was a little bit extreme. That's still a fantastic crowd. Don't get me wrong. But, you looked at the NCHC crowd. That's a big arena, the Xcel Energy Center, and they'll be moving to campus sites in 2 years. So I can kind of see why certain buildings don't work anymore, especially geographically, leagues that are so spread out. So, you mentioned it. What you saw at Bemidji, what you saw at RIT, and what you saw Monterina at Michigan State. Unbelievable crowds.
Bottom line, if we grade the committee on how they handled this time around, A+, it seems like they did a terrific job.
Yeah, A or A plus is fine by me because that's the way it just seemed that they didn't do anything that didn't seem relatively obvious. They weren't trying to do something crazy and make some sort of a statement. They followed their guidelines to the T. And because of that, I think you have 4 good regions, 4 competitive regions. That North Dakota, Michigan State, Western Michigan region, undoubtedly the bracket of death.
Yeah.
That is one of the toughest regions that we've seen in quite some time. But, it's going to create a great atmosphere and some good hockey.
Well, with that, we'll wrap up this special edition of USCHO Spotlight. This podcast has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Spotlight.